United States, I've been hearing this story about the National Association of Realtors in that country vowing to bring down commission rates. They are generally around 6%, split between buyer and seller agents when you are purchasing a home or selling a home. So I immediately thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. We're talking about a housing crisis. We're talking about people getting into housing, buying a first home, and we have mortgage rates. We have generally, interest rates going up to try and curb inflation, and if we can save some money around here. So anyway, my mind immediately went to, is this happening in Canada? Is this a sign that Canada is going to follow suit? Well, who better? Here's a name you know, not only around the region, but certainly from City News 570. He is the broker of record at Remax Twin City Realty and Faisal Susiwala Realty. Faisal Susiwala is joining us now. Good morning, Faisal.
Good morning, Larry. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
So you heard about this story, I guess, out of the National Association of Realtors in the U.S. Is this something that could happen in Canada where rates could come down, or the commission rates?
Yeah, so, it's more of a shift that is happening. So let's look at what the National Association of Realtors has done in the U.S. The shift means that the compensation for buyer's agents will no longer be publicly displayed in the listing services and would be outside of that. So basically what they're saying is you cannot basically publish what the buyer broker's commission would be. So let's look at the Canadian system. We have a listing fee of, let's call it 5%, 4%, 6%, whatever it may be. When we meet with the seller, we are at that point suggesting to them what the cooperating broker commission would be in order to incentivize the buyer's brokerage to participate in selling the property and bringing offers to the table. But what NAR has done is said, well, you guys are price fixing, and this is collusion for the sellers to pay more commission. And that's no longer going to be permitted. And they settled at, I think, $418 million, and they went after many other brokerages. And I think a lot of this. So the Canadian lawsuit here is more or less based on a copycat lawsuit of what's happened in the U.S. But what's different in the Canadian system is that there's already buyer brokerage fees set up as a buyer representation set up, where a buyer has a representation from a broker, and they already have agreed on what fee that buyer broker would be paid. So there's all kinds of representation agreements that are in place in Canada. So I kind of fail to see how that affects us as much. It's more of a shift from, saying, well, the seller pays the full 5%. Well, okay, the seller might pay the 2.5%, and you as the buyer have to pay the 2.5% to your buyer broker, which, again, in Canada would not work very well, because in a market that we have today where it is very difficult to even scrape up the 5% or 10% down, to come up with the additional 2.5% would be a challenge. So these are all things that, we're working through, and there is a lawsuit that's pending in Canada to see a shift in the way we do business here.
And we say pending, it's is it accepted as a suit? Is it a class action suit? Where's that process?
Yeah, so it's a class action suit that started back in September against the Canadian Real Estate Association, basically alleging the same thing, that we in Canada are price fixing. So it's basically, where all the realtors are getting together and saying we're going to, only charge 6%, and the seller has to charge 6%, the seller has to pay 6%. There's no such thing. In fact, open up any magazine, newspaper, social media platform, you see offerings of as low as 1% to sell your home, or sell your home for $699. So that environment just does not exist here. So again, it's shocking to me that that would even be a class action suit here. We don't have a governing body in Canada that says this is what you must charge. And I don't believe that the National Association of Realtors in the U.S. had that, but it was a class action there. And, whether it is a settlement to make it go away or if it is truly what they are doing in the U.S., I can't speak to that. But I can tell you in Canada, we do not have a system where a governing body or a brokerage is mandating us to charge a certain commission. Even as a seller, if I'm at your home, Larry, and we're going to charge you 5% commission, on the listing form, it says, what will the compensation be to a cooperating broker? And, I'm going to say, be careful what you wish for with these lawsuits, because if all of a sudden every seller says, I'm going to pay 0% to the cooperating broker, I will pay you, the listing agent, 2.5% to sell my home or 3% to sell my home, and the buyer can get their own representation and pay their own agent, we're not going to see a lot of activity because the buyers simply cannot pay out of pocket and add that to their financial burden.
Mm-hmm. Is it a matter of people are lining up to buy any particular home, and homes have multiple offers and sold over asking? You always see that sign. Is it a matter of the market right now?
Well, we're seeing multiple offers. We've always seen multiple offers. Even in times when the market was slow, we were seeing multiple offers. At the end of the day, it is an incentive that is offered to a buyer broker. You're going to take the job that pays you the most money. And if a seller is offering 2.5% or 2%, which is standard in the business. It's not price fixed, but it is just a standard that's always been offered. So if all of a sudden they say we're going to offer you 0%, go get the commission from your buyer. Now, the buyers have the option right now to self-represent themselves and not even use a broker and come in and say, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, you can, pay your agent. You don't have to pay my agent anything because I don't have an agent. Or they could go to their buyer's agent and say, look, I want you to represent me, and for that, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars as a fee. Or they could just simply go to their lawyer's office and say, write up the agreement. I want to present an offer on a home that is currently for sale. All of that is already in our system. It is already allowed. So there is no price fixing mandating that you must use a realtor to purchase, or even that you must use a realtor to sell the property. It just seems like a lot of noise out there for nothing. And again, I believe it's a copycat lawsuit that's just following what our neighbors in the U.S. have been dealing with. Again, it may be a revenue source for lawyers and people to occupy their time with.
Right. Wow. So much more to this. I've learned so much. Faisal, thank you so much for your time and insights today. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take care.
Faisal Susiwala Realty, and he's also the broker of record at Twin City Realty.